Happy Halloween, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this spooky edition of the Below Average Joe's MMA podcast. As always, your host, I'm Noah Baker, and I'm joined by the lovely and ghoulish Dominic Lee. Dominic, how are you?
Hey, Noah, man. I'm doing really good.
Dominic, we can't hear you. You might want to take the mask off.
Anyway. Hey, Noah. I'm doing really good. Spooky season is in full effect. It's basically Halloween when you guys are hearing this, so it's good enough, right? But yeah, we got a lot to discuss today, Noah. All ghoulish, spooky things aside, we've got PFL, we've got Contender Series, we've got UFC 267, the return to Fight Island. The energy is at another level today, my friend.
The one question I got for you before we get started, Dominic.
Okay.
Do you consider yourself an island boy?
I'm an island. Nah. I was going to start singing. I'm like, let's grace our listeners' ears and be nice. But am I an island boy? Yeah, I'd like to say so. What about you?
Oh, for sure. Let's catch a wave.
Catch a wave to Abu Dhabi, baby.
UFC 267. But first, those stinky fight announcements.
Stinky.
Only a couple today, and they start on a negative note.
I hate when this happens.
Yeah, this is a tough one. The rematch that we wanted to happen, that we needed to see, get some clarity on. Kevin Holland is unfortunately out of his scheduled bout with Kyle Daukaus set for November 13th. Holland getting some sort of injury in training. This is coming off the heels of their first encounter about a month ago when there was an accidental clash of heads that essentially knocked out Kevin Holland cold. But then Big Dan let the fight prolong a little bit. Daukaus does get a submission win, but upon review, Dan realizes that he was pretty much out cold. So no contest, essentially. Right. They were trying to run it back. Daukaus, I don't know if you saw, Dominic, he did post a tweet essentially wishing Kevin a speedy recovery. Said, I will see you in February, but I have some unfinished business to take care of. So it sounds like he's trying to stay on this November 13th card, which I, for one, have no problem with. I don't have any opponent in mind either, but unfortunate. But I do like the idea of him staying on that Holloway Rodriguez card. We could use some more names on there.
Yeah, for sure. I agree. And this is a great fight when it inevitably gets ran back. Shout out to Kevin Holland. Hope all is well for Daukaus. Still a young, bright prospect. I love watching him fight. Let's keep him on that card. Opponent, I don't even care. I just want to see him stay on there and get a fight.
We're going to transition into the featherweight division. Before Tuesday, I could have said 2 top 15 featherweights, but instead, one looks to earn his way back in as number 13, Movsar Evloev, looks to hold his spot against Ilia Topuria, I believe it's Topuria. Topuria being the number 15 ranked featherweight. Before Tuesday, they decided to replace him with Bruce Leroy himself. And we love us some Bruce Leroy, so I'll let it slide. I was a little angry at first because Topuria, I think, just has a little bit higher of a ceiling, a little bit more potential, but my man Bruce Leroy, he's on a nice win streak, so we'll let it slide. But this is a great fight. And ultimately, if Topuria is worthy of being in the top 15, then this is a fight for him to really show that. Not that Evloev is some sort of cakewalk, not at all. These are two guys that I think can and will be contenders in this featherweight division very soon. So we're kind of getting a taste of the future of the division before they even get there. I just think that as long as Topuria can put up a good fight here, it should be enough to show, hey, he's top 15 right now. Even if they don't give him the number, that guy's going to be top 10, top 5 before we know it.
Yeah, for sure. This is a fantastic fight. You and I were all over this when it got announced on Twitter. And I got to say, Noah, we haven't had one of these in a while, or if we have, we just haven't acknowledged it. But in this one, someone's O has got to go. Two undefeated, young, talented prospects, as Noah said, future contenders, potential title holders. A lot on the line in this one for the young bloods. That's a fantastic addition to that UFC 270 card that is very much stacking up.
Yeah, that's right. UFC 270. I didn't even mention that. That's January 22nd. So it's going to be a great way to break in the new year, 2022. Looking fantastic.
Whew.
let's move on to Dana White's Contender Series Week 9. Only one more week for the season, Dominic.
I know.
It's coming to a close. We had 6 fights this time, so we got 1 for free, which is always nice. It's always nice to get a little extra.
Of course.
I guess just off the top, based on the 6 fights that you watched, who, as I always ask you, is the biggest standout or the biggest – what stood out to you most about this week for the Contender Series?
Biggest standout for me, Javid Basharat, a fantastic, phenomenal performance. 11-0, 11 finishes, hails from Afghanistan. Not too many Afghan fighters in the UFC, if I remember correctly. And now here's another one to add to the roster. Fantastic, well-rounded, great on the feet, very sharp. Not wild, but very precise and technical. And on the ground, fantastic grappling, submissions, transitioning. Everything was flawless in this performance. And to go in with an undefeated record in the UFC says a lot. This was an amazing performance from start to finish. And yeah, Basharat for sure, biggest standout for me on week number 9.
Yeah, he's got to be the biggest standout. There was a lot of eyes on this fight going in due to the bad blood from the weigh-in and the fallout from that. And Basharat really showed that he's ready. I mean, this is no doubt about it. And he put a hurting on Kahlon for 3 rounds. You even said off recording you thought he probably could have stopped that fight multiple times prior, but due to the bad blood, he wanted to extend that punishment a little bit longer. Sickest move of the whole season, wrapping up that choke. He looks straight at his corner and gives a little nod.
Chills.
That's pretty fucking
cold.
That's Allen Iverson stepping over Tyronn Lue levels. But to give someone else some shine here, actually the fight between Cristian Quinonez and Long Xiao. Yeah, this went to a unanimous decision. It was It was a unanimous decision win for Quinonez, and this was a fantastic fight. A bit of a slugfest, but Quinonez clearly won and really showed some nice striking. Showed really that he's just another guy that belongs in the UFC. And interesting that this is the second card that stuck out to me, Dominic, for 2021, where Dana has put, I think UFC 261, I think did it, and then this one where there was 3 different products from China as far as like the UFC's, developmental program they have going with China, that the PI out there. But both cards, these fighters not getting any wins, so. That's not really I don't think that's really a testament to anything about them. It's interesting that we are seeing some pretty big pushes for that market. I like it. I like where the head's at. And I was really I really thought there might have been something with Yan, the woman's flyweight.
Yeah.
Her record, if you look at it, I don't even know if the UFC recognized all her wins, but on Tapology, she was 25-3. But I think 6 of her her last 6 wins were against 0-0 opponents. A little sussy on the record, but she just looked like she reminded me of Jessica Andrade, just the build and her style of fight. But she does lose to Karine Silva via submission.
That was a sick fight too, by the way.
And I have no complaints with the contracts this week. 4 or 5 out of 6.
Yep.
But this was actually probably not to put a negative spin on this. I'm going to bring it back positive. If I had to measure this up to the rest of the weeks of season 5 so far, probably the weakest in terms of good fights, but a lot of standout performances. There was a little bit more of a one-sidedness to this card.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Again, Quinonez and Xiao being kind of the one, back and forth fight. Maybe Silva and Yan, but the rest of these, it felt like it was pretty one-sided who the winner was, but that's really not a bad thing for Contender Series, man. I mean, as much as I love and prefer watching great fights, back and forth fights, when you're looking for the next contenders, the next big prospects, you may not want them to, perhaps have to overcome some adversity against what is otherwise lower level opponents. Maybe it's better if you have cards like this where you see a lot of people that shine with their performances rather than the fight itself.
Right. And although China went 0-3, Mexico stand up. You went 2-0. Quinonez and Manuel Torres both have trained with Brandon Moreno, the flyweight champion. Now both launched their way into the UFC with contracts. It again just shows that when the UFC goes to Mexico, to China, to potentially Abu Dhabi, these places where they're investing time and money and efforts to grow the sport, it's paying off.
Yeah, and since we are about to wind down season 5 of the Contender Series, as crazy as that is to say, there was an interesting point brought up in the post-fight press conference by Mr. Dana White himself. He mentioned that, again, Dana loves the Contender Series, obviously. Yeah. His name's in the title.
Exactly.
The guy loves it. And he was gushing about it again, and he made this point before he gave the contracts, and then again at the press conference. He said that right now he believes that the Contender Series is the second best library in combat sports. First, obviously, being UFC. The UFC.
Yeah.
Now, what's interesting, Dominic, is that when it comes to kind of evaluating fight libraries, really, unless it's on Fight Pass, which is owned and operated by the UFC, like Bellator doesn't have, if you're talking about a library where, like, somewhere you can go on the internet or on an app and watch top to bottom their cards.
Right.
Bellator doesn't have that. As far as I know, One doesn't have that. Ryzen doesn't have that. So really, it's all that's on the UFC. You got Pride, you got WEC, Strikeforce. Those are really the top competitors here. But Dominic, do you agree or disagree that Contender Series has become the second best library in combat sports?
Dana, I respect it, but man, that was a bold statement he made, and I don't blame him at all. This is his show that he birthed, and it is amazing. They have fantastic fights, especially that all these kids are literally in their young 20s, mid-20s contenders, and they're putting on fantastic fights. But man, the second best library in combat sports over the likes of like a Pride, a Strikeforce, a WEC, what was it, Pank Race? Is that how you say it?
Yeah.
From back in the day, I mean, there's a lot of OG fights that are going to have some wild moments in their library. Again, maybe it comes down to what libraries, quote unquote, are available to see, as Noah said. But Dana, I love you. I don't know if this is quite number 2, but I will say the Contender Series is an incredible library archive of fights nonetheless.
Yeah, it's hard for me to before he said this, I never really separated it from the UFC.
Exactly. Yeah.
Which, I mean, it really isn't. It's ultimately a show that is meant to get prospects for UFC cards.
Yeah.
But if you do separate it like that, I mean, it is a very strong product. I won't lie. And while I don't think, in all honesty, it doesn't really stack up to any of those three. Just those three have a lot of history. There's a lot of nostalgia.
Yeah.
Sure. You watch some of those, especially early on, those Pride WEC Strikeforce cards. There's some bad fights on there. There's some mismatches. There's some pretty dull fights. But, even the UFC's very early catalog has a lot of that as well. But I just think that it'll be hard for Contender Series to really, I think, in the viewpoint of the public, be able to pass some of those just because those promotions aren't around. They're from a different time. They have a lot of very rabid fan base that are very nostalgic, and
yes, that was the word.
There's just a very big sense of pride, for lack of a better word, in those promotions. So I like it, though. I like where his head's at.
Yeah, of course.
Now we're going to move in to the PFL Championships, Dominic.
Oh my!
Happening Wednesday, essentially all fucking day.
That's true.
You know what? Maybe I'm gonna say this now before we talk about the action of the fight, because I don't want this to disrupt the flow here. But wow, I understand. I've seen some poorly paced UFC cards, Bellator cards. This one probably takes the cake for the most poorly paced MMA card I've ever seen.
Yeah.
It's not the first time I've noticed that with PFL, but this was egregious. What time did this card start? It was 5?
Prelims were at 4:30 or 5 o'clock.
4:30.
Yeah,
And
something
I
like
remember, and Kayla Harrison's main event ended at about midnight.
Yeah,
I mean, and it was 10 fights, Dominic.
yeah. And
That's
6
about
of
a
them were
fight.
5-round fights.
That's about a fight an hour.
Yeah, yeah.
And plus, like, was this a 6-fight main card or was it?
It was. It was.
So 4 of these fights are on the prelims, and it just became painfully obvious that they were just, the poor commentary team. I mean, you got Randy Couture, Ken Flo, and who's the main guy in the middle? I forget his name now. But those poor 3, they were struggling, man.
Oh, yeah.
They were stopping, and then you could tell that they're just like, you guys got to keep talking. And I'm like, oh, my God.
Well, I mean, that's been like one of the biggest complaints of PFL this year. They put on great fights, and the season's awesome, the format, but the pacing at which they do their broadcast, not ideal.
And we'll get into that a little bit more later because this is going to
True.
It'll relate to a later question. But let's start with Kayla Harrison. She was the main event. She was the biggest draw of the card. She was in the finals for her second straight women's lightweight title. She was going up against Taylor Guardado. Yeah,
Yes,
I can
there you
talk.
go.
I can speak English. This was a new opponent for her, but ultimately she goes down just like the rest of them. Submission win via armbar, round 2, 4 minutes on the dot. I will say for Taylor, in her credit, she did have some nice defense. She wasn't really ever able to get any offense off. But again, this is Kayla Harrison. Nobody really expected much.
Yeah.
I do think she held on longer than a lot have. She showed basically what it all boiled down to was every time Kayla would set up either a submission or she would try to advance position on the ground, Guardado always seemed smart enough to stop it. But then Kayla, being just levels above, always had a follow-up. So Guardado just was completely outmatched here is really what it comes down to. But I'll at least give her credit for her defense here because it held up for a while. Even with the armbar, she at least was trying. I mean, she was trying, man. But all in all, Kayla Harrison does get a very dominant win. And Dominic, we really don't even have to focus more on the fight itself because I think it's pretty clear how this fight went.
Yeah.
I think the question on everybody's mind is what's next for Kayla Harrison? Her contract with the PFL is officially over.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking the most lucrative free agent in mixed martial arts as of today, Noah. This is very intriguing, very interesting. I mean, it seems there's 3 obvious choices and then, maybe a little AEW wrestling action as a, maybe a default back there. But, is she going to stay with the PFL? Is she going to continue to do another season? Is she going to chase another million? Bellator is a very nice option, in my opinion. I think a fight with her and Chris Cyborg, they've kind of had their run-ins with trash talk, and that's an amazing fight. It's a rightful step up for Kayla in terms of her PFL competition to Cyborg. Gives her a chance to get a women's mixed martial arts legend on her resume, get her name out there in Bellator. They have a very a healthy women's featherweight division in Bellator, which is nice compared to option number 3 being the UFC. And obviously, a problem there is that Amanda Nunes, being the bantamweight and featherweight champion in the UFC, that's also Kayla Harrison's very good friend, training partner. I mean, they used each other for Kayla's fight, and Kayla's helping Amanda get ready for Juliana Pena in December. So I don't know how realistic that fight really is, at least right now in this very near future. So, when I put out those 3 options, I don't hate the idea of her going to Bellator at all, my friend.
I think the UFC is the least likely destination for Kayla Harrison.
Mm-hmm.
And it really, there's a mixture of reasons. The big one, and for me personally, as from my viewpoint as a fan, is that outside of the Amanda Nunes fight, which I do think is a realistic fight, I know that they are training partners, they're teammates, but I think if it came down to it, those 2 would still fight.
Mm-hmm.
It's a great fight on paper, but if Kayla wins or loses, if she wins, you do her and Nunes a second time, I guess, and then what is there for her after that?
Right.
You got Norma Dumont, you got Aspen Ladd hanging around. I don't know. Are any of those fights really going to get you to pay $70 on pay-per-view. I'm sure we will, but
Right.
most wouldn't. So then Bellator, in my opinion, is a great, if she's really looking to, if her motivation is probably more on the competitive side, where it's,
Yes.
Obviously she should get paid, and that should be number one. Make that money. I think Bellator might be the best choice here. If a change of scenery is another thing that she also wants along with getting paid, I mean, Bellator's got a women's featherweight division. It's not necessarily strong, but it's not weak either. It did lose Julia Budd, former champion who went to the PFL. That's a tough loss. But Chris Cyborg is the champion there, and she is one of the all-time greats for women's MMA.
Yep.
So you have that fight immediately. But then there's at least a division there.
Exactly.
There's not going to be a ton of big fights after that, but again, at least there's names there. Like if Kayla became a big enough star to where she kind of crossed over, Ronda Rousey-esque or Conor McGregor-esque, not necessarily that extreme, but
yeah,
if she could at least cross over a little bit, it really doesn't matter who she's fighting. My problem with the UFC is I just don't think even after the Nunes fight she could really make that same crossover if there's nobody for her to fight, really.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Bellator is great, in my opinion. That's a great option. And the last one that's kind of been under the radar is just staying with the PFL.
For sure.
Everybody is assuming that she's going to leave, but she just made $1 million for the second straight season.
Yeah.
She's not making $1 million for fighting in Bellator or the UFC.
Right.
So she does it here. She pretty clearly is dominant enough to where she's going to keep probably winning if she stays. I mean, why? And the PFL, I think, would be very invested in trying to keep her. That's the thing. Is like, and this is going to kind of spill into my next question, or a question, I guess, kind of later on. But, PFL's contract with ESPN is up. So they're looking for a new broadcasting deal. They're looking for a new place to host their fights. They're going to want to keep someone like Kayla Harrison around, someone that could really be the star that they pitch to, whether it's TNT, who's about their deal with ONE FC is about to be up. There's streaming options as well.
Maybe they re-up with ESPN.
Well, sure, but I'm just saying that there are other options out there, and I do think that her staying with the PFL is not unrealistic. I think it's
no.
I guess is that what I want? Me personally, like at the end of the day, I just want her to do what she wants to do. If she gets paid the most there, then stick around there. But I would be interested in seeing her versus Julia Budd.
Yeah.
But then again, it's like after that, it's going to be a lot of the same names that she's already kind of beaten up. Yeah. So it's interesting. My head says I want her to go to Bellator, but again, it's her choice, and she should do whichever company offers her the best deal. I just think the UFC is not going to offer her the money she wants, and is the least amount of fights that I guess would be of value. So I feel like the UFC is a super unrealistic option right now, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, and what
Dana made a lot of comments as well about Kayla Harrison. So I wanted to get your thoughts on those comments. And do you feel like that's an even bigger sign that maybe the UFC is not as interested in Kayla Harrison as we all think they should be?
I mean, he made great points in that interview when he's like, she's getting paid $1 million. She's getting, good matchups, obviously. So, if you're her, why wouldn't you stay there and continue building your resume, building your bank account up? Because when you're in the UFC, there's the Amanda, and she's, these are the best in the world in the UFC. Typical Dana thing, which again, the UFC does have the best in the world. I'm not denying that. But, I saw a lot of people saying, this is maybe just some negotiating tactics. I have it in my head. Maybe it's negotiating tactics. But the more and more I look at it, I'm like, if it doesn't make sense for the UFC to bring her over long term, especially, maybe they're not really that invested or interested in her. Because at the end of the day, if they lose out on Kayla to another organization, I don't think they're sweating it too much, being that she is a lightweight. She has to come down to featherweight. Featherweight is already a division that is not really a division in the UFC. So maybe they're looking at it as like, yeah, she's a big name. It would be a good acquisition for us. But long term, does it do much for us? Can we do much for her in return? I don't see that great of a relationship between them right now if she were to sign there. And I got to add on before I get your thoughts on Dana. In the post-fight presser with Kayla, she still has that confidence in her that not everybody loves, but I love the way she carries herself. But she did have that switch, right? She just had her niece and nephew adopted, so she is their official parent now. She's got 2 mouths to feed, and she kind of had a mindset change to where, of course, she wants to be the best in the world. She wants the competition to be as stiff as possible to prove she's the best in the world. But money is priority number one now to provide for herself, her family. So I just wanted to throw that out there as well in terms of what's going through her head during this free agency process.
Yeah, 100%. I think we've hit everything there. Move on to the rest of the PFL championships.
Yeah, there were 5 other titles, I guess.
Yep, there were 5 others. But before we even get into those, probably the second biggest story here was our featured bout.
You're right.
Claressa Shields got the first professional loss in combat sports for her in her unanimous or split decision loss to Abigail Montez, who moves to 3-0 in her young MMA career. Now, Dominic, obviously, Claressa Shields being such a high-profile combat sports athlete due to her I guess, prestige in women's boxing. She made a big splash coming over to the PFL, had an exciting debut that she had to kind of battle back from some adversity here. Wasn't quite able to overcome said adversity again. I guess you can give your thoughts on the fight, but what does this loss say about Claressa Shields' current standing and future in MMA?
I kind of hinted at it on when was it? I guess it was Monday when we talked about this, because it's 3-episode week. Shameless plug. That Claressa Shields is still so young, and I do respect her for making this transition. She's been getting a lot of hate on MMA Twitter this past week. I noticed.
Don't really get it.
Yeah, it's unwarranted to me. At the end of the day, the MMA community should respect her for doing this because we don't see boxers come over and make this. And she seems very committed to me, and she seems like she's motivated, dedicated to become good at this. She's only 26 years old, so the fight specifically didn't go her way. She looked good in the first round. I thought she did very good offensively. Her striking looked good. She had good clinch control up against the cage. But rounds 2 and 3, Abigail Montez implemented her strength, pressed Claressa up against the fence, took her down and dominated her on the ground. And we knew that that's still the glaring weakness in Claressa's game. It got tested in her first fight. And a lot of people are saying, if you're the PFL, what are we doing? Why are we giving her these type of matchups? And where I can see a side of it where you want to test her, but at the end of the day, she's been training in MMA for 9 months, and we're feeding her 2 wrestlers basically back to back. Why are we not giving her at least someone more in the striking realm to get her more comfortable? I don't know kind of what the process is over there.
Are you advocating for Claressa Shields to fight cans?
No,
I'm
gosh,
just kidding.
Noah. But the matchups are just, again, there's a part of me that respects it because I'm like, hey, let's just test her straight up, I guess. But at the same time, if you're wanting to build her as a star for the PFL, especially if you lose Kayla Harrison, do you want her to rack up a couple losses, be 1-2, 1-3? I don't know, man. But in terms of her current standing and future in MMA, I'm okay. She took a loss, go back to the drawing board, continue training. She's at one of the best camps in the world with Jackson Wink. I think she still is going to get some fights in with PFL. I'm not just going to throw in the towel because of this loss here, because she did still have some positive takeaways all in all.
Okay, so I agree with like the current standing as far as like I'm okay. It's a loss, but again, we're not expecting her to be a world beater. Again, tough matchup. I mean, Abigail Montez, while not offering much in the striking, she was very strong, very stout. had really good control, good takedowns. Not necessarily, I guess, a high-level opponent, but, it was tough for Claressa here. This was not an easy opponent by any means considering how long she's been training in MMA. Now, I saw the fight a little bit differently. Like rounds 2 and 3 were on the same page, but I didn't really see any success for Claressa in any round outside of when they were at range. Very few and far between. She was able to land some very nice 1-2s. Her hand speed is phenomenal.
Yeah.
Some of the fastest you'll see in any combat sport. But the problem is that she couldn't keep Montez off of her.
Yeah.
And truthfully, this fight itself didn't give me really any positive takeaways. The fight was kind of a dud. But in terms of Claressa's ability, she did look a little lost at times, even trying to get underhooks and things like that in the clinch. She would do it, and then she kind of wouldn't. And then when Montez got that top mount, that's when it became very glaring in round 3 that Claressa just still has a lot of learning to do. She just kind of didn't know what to do. Just started kind of flailing, throwing strikes that weren't even really landing while she's getting beat up from the top position. But yeah, again, all in all, this loss, I think there's going to be a lot of people that are going to hold this loss against her. For some reason, you're right. She has kind of made herself into some sort of enemy of the MMA community. And I'm not, as much as I love, and we talk about how we love MMA Twitter, I don't really get into it that much.
It'd be hard out there sometimes.
Like there's some people, like I thought I liked MMA Twitter, and then I realized I'm not really I'm not involved in it that much. There's some people that just get really into it, and they, I don't really like it when you start going after fighters. Like it just, you kind of lose me. I'm not saying that that's what happened here. I didn't really see where the root of it is. I just noticed that a lot of people didn't seem to like Claressa Shields anymore. I'm not sure what she's said or done that might have brought that on, but from my perspective, I still have a lot of respect for what she's doing. And I think a question though, Dominic, is, after this loss, like, is she really going to see a reason to continue down this road? I hope so. I mean, really her even coming into the sport, she had to kind of face that head on where it's like, is it really worth it? I'm the best at what I do, and now I'm going to go and basically start new in another sport.
Yeah.
Like she already kind of had to face that decision when she started, but you know how fighter egos can be. Obviously she had an elite skill in her boxing, and maybe she just assumed she could come over, and as long as she could have some decent takedown defense, that she would just piece people up. It's not that simple. I'm not saying that's what she thought. I'm just saying that fighter egos can sometimes convince them a lot of things. And maybe now with the loss, this is someone who's never lost before. Like, how is she gonna, respond to that?
Mm-hmm.
She seemed fine in the fallout of the fight, in the cage and everything. I'll be interested to see though. Supposedly, the rumor is that she's going to defend her boxing titles either early next year or late this year. So I'll be interested to see kind of once she goes back to boxing and if she picks up another win, where does that kind of leave her MMA future? But for now, I'm okay. I'm again, just like you said. But for the PFL itself, or I guess the rest of the card here, because we do have 5 other title fights that deserve some recognition. Again, what stood out most from this card, Dominic?
The heavyweights, dude. This fight was one of the craziest fights of 2021. I'm gonna have to put it on the Joey's nominee for Fight of the Year, because this fight was nuts. Bruno Capoloza, Ante Dilia, I say his name wrong on Monday. It's Dilia, not Dilije, Dilia. Went to war, to say the least. Round 1, Bruno essentially knocks out Ante and dominates him. Round 2, Bruno was dead ass asleep on the camp. I was watching round 2 and I'm like, Keith, what are we doing? He's out right now.
Yeah, they call him no stoppage Keith Peterson for a reason.
No stoppage, no nonsense. This guy, I don't know. That was crazy. But then to Bruno's credit, he bounces back, comes back to life. I have it 1-1. Round 3, Bruno comes out, does the same thing he did in round 1. Ante's in big trouble. And then rounds 4 and 5, it definitely simmered down just a little bit. But Ilia, to his credit, won round 4, in my opinion. It was back and forth. I had it 2-2 going into round 5. A lot more grappling, clinch work in those championship rounds. And Bruno able to cap it off in the 5th with a great takedown, more dominance on the ground. Again, fantastic fight. These guys fought earlier in the season. Bruno made it look easy, got a KO, as he did his entire run this year until the championship fight. So for them to cap it off with going 5 rounds in an absolute war, what a fight, what a story. I also just have to say, I saw this after the fight. Bruno's father suddenly passed away leading into this bout. His family did not tell him so that he could focus on this fight. Now he's a PFL champion, $1 million, and he went straight back to Brazil to be with his family, remember his father. So I just had to point that out as well. Bruno, hope all is well for your family, and what a performance. What a season for Bruno Capoloza.
Yeah, this was the second time these two fought in this season. Like you said, the first encounter, very swift KO for Capoloza, and I think most thought that maybe Ilia would hold on a little bit longer, maybe show a little bit more. It is the championship after all, but that overall Bruno would do what he has done this entire season and get probably a first round finish. That was especially what I was thinking, and it looked like we were on our way.
Yeah, man,
Bruno looked so good in round 1, and you're right. The first half of this fight is like up there for fight of the year.
Yeah.
And the second half is a 5-round heavyweight fight. What are you going to do? You
don't get them much for a reason.
These guys were hurt. They had both been basically knocked out multiple times, and they had been punched back into consciousness. That's a concept I can't even begin to understand. And rounds 4 and 5, it was, again, just all heart. It was guys running on fumes, basically nothing left in the gas tank and trying to push through. Great fight. Co-main event, though, Ray Cooper III, second title with the PFL.
Yep.
He avenges the loss from the 2018 PFL championship over Magomed Karimov in round 3, 3 minutes, 2 seconds in. The setup for this was fantastic. I mean, the size difference between these two was very interesting. You got Cooper, who's the shorter, more compact, bigger arms, bigger legs, a bit stronger, and Magomed Karimov is the longer, lankier of the two, better reach, things like that.
For sure.
But his problem was Magomed. He was partially maybe due to the height advantage. It was kind of a disadvantage in that he was keeping his chin a bit high.
Yeah.
And Ray Cooper eventually just found it flush. And when he did, it was all over. It was just done. But he knocked him out cold. And big shout out to Ray Cooper III. He comes from a good family for fighting. And for him to get his second championship like this, he's another guy that maybe not on the level of Kayla Harrison, but he's a guy that the PFL really could build around as well. He's stayed committed to the PFL. Wouldn't surprise me if he's going to want to continue with them moving forward. And again, with the highlight reel KO to finish off the season, this only helps the PFL as they're looking to find their next outlet for their next season.
Right.
There's some other great performances on here. Haush Manfio. A lot of people didn't see him getting that win over Loic Radzhabov, but he looked fantastic. Antonio Carlos Jr. getting a quick round 1 submission, former UFC veteran. Movlid Haibulayev looking so dominant over Chris Wade. All in all, fantastic card. Really.
And I go ahead. Sorry.
No, you go ahead.
I was just going to say, now that, the 2021 season is over, what did you think, Noah, all in all, seeing the PFL back in action this year, the regular season, the playoffs, the championship? Again, the pacing of the fight nights might not be the best, But the overall action, the grand scheme of how their tournament worked, are you satisfied and ready for some more in 2022?
It was the first season that I've watched of the PFL. I didn't watch the previous 2 seasons. I didn't watch it when it was the World Series of Fighting, back when guys like Justin Gaethje and Marlon Moraes were running roughshod. I really do like the PFL. There are things about it that I prefer. Like, okay, they're very different.
Yes, very.
Am I a huge proponent of the season format? No. But again, that's one of the things that makes them different and stand out. I do think that there's some I just like that they're really trying to differentiate themselves, so it's only going to help them. I would at least assume when it comes to finding an audience. And I think if you want to if I'm going to spin it around here and talk about the future of the PFL and maybe what's next for them as a promotion, again, ESPN deal over, it feels like it might be in their best interest to try to stay on ESPN Plus. They have to have a lot of crossover appeal due to the fact that the UFC is on ESPN Plus as well.
Yes.
However, maybe the UFC, they might not want the PFL to be under that same umbrella. So I would be kind of surprised if we see the PFL back on ESPN, but I do think that's probably what would be best for them. Beyond that, I think a move to TNT.
TNT?
Perfect, because TNT and One's deal is about to come to an end. You do PFL after AEW.
Yes, they're thriving with TNT.
Perfect, man. And I would actually be tempted to watch both. Again, I've talked about I haven't watched pro wrestling since like 2009 on a regular basis.
Yep.
I've been tempted to kind of get into some AEW. I don't know why. Maybe it's the Dan Lambert and ATT stuff. But really, in general, it seems like pro wrestling's kind of on the up and up again. You put PFL right behind it or right before it or whatever. Again, that's going to probably help the pacing as well because you are on a time constraint compared to – I don't know what it was. Again, I know this isn't the first time we've complained about the PFL's pacing, but these championships, there was no reason for this card to go on for 6.5 hours, 7.5 hours, however long, for 10
Deep
fights.
Into the night. Yeah.
Again, and I know you said you're like, well, half of them were 5-round decisions. Well, that makes it look even worse. Like, why is there so much downtime? It's like, what? Were you guys – is this the opposite of UFC 33 where you needed every fight to go to a 5-round decision in order for you guys to, like, keep a smooth pace? Because I don't know what it was going on here. It was kind of absurd at times, just like how long we were waiting in between fights. But, again, I like the PFL. Don't love a lot of the stats at the bottom. Why do we need to know the hand speed, the kick? Like that doesn't matter. Also, their scoring. What's that score in between rounds?
They have the verdict fan vote. They have the commentators, how they score, and then there's a fighter. I don't remember. It's like
FPR
some score.
rating.
Yeah, like an FPR rating kind of. It's what it is.
I think
and it rates how successful they were in the round on a scale of 1 to 100.
They need to get rid of that, whatever, or retool it, because that thing is usually not very correct. Having the verdict stuff is, it's fine because it gets the fans involved, but I don't use verdict. So, all in all, though, I love the PFL. I love that it's different. I would like to see some more cards throughout the year, but again, they might be just committed to that because that's what makes them stand out,
Very true.
All right, so let's move on to UFC 267.
Oh, boy.
Fights for breakfast, as Dominic has been saying. Saturday afternoon, Saturday morning, you can watch UFC 267 on ESPN Plus. The entire card is on ESPN Plus, people.
Yep.
That means as long as you pay I think it's $6 a month now for ESPN Plus, you can watch literally a card that's worth $70. So, I mean, it's a pretty big steal. In the main event, and we're not even paid to say that. We're just We're
But
just
we can be
shilling.
if anyone's interested.
We're just shilling for the UFC. We're just
Yeah.
putting that UFC cock down our throats right now.
As I take a drink of water.
So in main event, aging like fine wines, you got Jan Blachowicz, the light heavyweight champion, who has had this career renaissance. A man that was on the brink of being cut at one point has found himself basically reborn after going through the forest in Poland and finding the rope of a man who had committed suicide, and he has since been transformed into the Polish power himself. He's had how many victories in a row now?
He's won 9 of his last 10.
Okay,
and it is 5 in a row.
5 in a row. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, so 9 of his last 10. Wow, that's even more impressive. So he's defending his title against the number 1 contender, Glover Teixeira, who, to his credit, is kind of in a similar, you could say similar things about him. Mm-hmm. Another guy on a career renaissance right now. He's done it in a more under-the-radar fashion to Jan Blachowicz, considering Jan won a title and has been defending title against Adesanya and stuff like that. But Glover is 40 years old.
41, yeah.
41, and is now back in a place where he has earned himself a title shot with wins over guys like Thiago Santos, like Anthony Smith. And this is a guy who fought John Jones for the light heavyweight title at UFC 172. I believe that was back in 2013.
Yep.
So the fact that he once again 8 years later finds himself back in the contender role, it's very impressive. And this is even to go. We haven't even considered the fact that this man's career was almost over before it even started.
Yeah.
You know, back when he was on his rise and he was looked at as like a huge prospect, he had visa issues for 4 years that prevented him from fighting in the UFC, nearly derailed his entire career. So considering all the progress he has made to get to this place, and, you know, he's had his dips, and, you know, I remember the first time we ever watched the card together at B-Dubs, Dominic. He went up against a man named Anthony Rumble Johnson.
Oh, shit.
He knocked him out in about 10 seconds.
Yeah.
And it was something to watch. And honestly, you could have looked at Glover right there and been like, oh, this guy's career's about done.
Yeah.
And now look at him. Fighting for
5
the
in a
title.
row.
He earned it. He had to go through stiff competition to get here. I love this fight. My question, though, Dominic, is this fight and the winner of this fight for the title of not just the light heavyweight champion, but also for the greatest career resurgence in MMA history?
It's got to be, right? If it ain't, it's up there in the top 3 for sure. This is such a feel-good fight to me. You know, Jan, of course, started in the UFC 2-4, was on the brink of getting cut. Since then, 9 of 10, 5 in a row. He's the UFC champion. He destroys Dominic Reyes to get the belt. He beats the then undefeated Israel Adesanya. So it's just crazy. Jan's story from Poland. He was the first male champion from Poland and the second all time with Joanna champion. And now you got Glover Teixeira, who, when he came into the UFC, as Noah said, it took 4 years longer than it needed to get him there. He was undefeated when he came in to the UFC. John Jones was his first professional loss. And after that loss, he kind of did mingle back and forth with wins and losses. And now he's 41 years old. He's also on a 5-fight win streak. And this guy is a finisher to its core. Both these guys really love finishing fights. And again, one of the best feel-good stories, definitely the fight for the best career resurgence. It's a fight that is so enticing in terms of a stylistic bout as well. 2 guys that have power, but they're well-rounded with their grappling as well. One of my favorite stats when we discuss Jan Blachowicz, he has 1 more submission than KO, and he's known for the legendary Polish power. I just love bringing that up. Mm-hmm. But I think this is such an amazing fight. It checks all the boxes for me. I'm so glad that they get the main event slot to put on a showcase at Fight Island.
Yeah, that is a great sentiment, and it is a bit of a feel-good fight, but that's such a weird term to use in MMA, isn't it? A feel-good fight. At the end of the day, these two are going to go in there and look to beat the shit out of each other. You know, and not just one of them lose. One of them's probably going to get finished here. I mean,
yeah, I agree.
Just the stats say that, and that's kind of going to be my next question here, Dominic. Is, I mean, this fight can't go all 5 rounds, right? I know Blachowicz has shown an ability to go 5 rounds. His fight with Adesanya showed a lot of interesting and, dare I say, impressive advancements in his game.
Yeah.
Not the most exciting fight in the world. Not necessarily a fight where Blachowicz was, not the most exciting fight, I think we can all admit. And rounds 4 and 5, when Blachowicz really had most of his success, it was a lot of using that size advantage to his advantage, getting that fight to the ground and kind of holding top position, not necessarily utilizing a lot of ground and pound. But when you really look at the nuances of that fight, Blachowicz, just the fact that cardio was able to last for 5 rounds, that he was really still, setting up very nice takedowns in rounds 4 and 5. He just seems to still be improving. And that's just so scary and so wild to me. I mean, he's 38 years old.
Yeah.
It's not young, but he's still kind of in a spot where, like, it's not necessarily unheard of for a guy to get better at this age.
Mm-hmm.
It's just for him to, considering that he improved so much seemingly out of nowhere, which it's not really out of nowhere. 9 of his last 10 wins, or 9 of his last 10 fights and being wins, it just feels that way. Glover Teixeira, however, while I'm very impressed with the run he's on, maybe even more impressed because he's doing it while he's still – there are things about his game that are clearly what's the best way to word this? He's clearly diminishing in certain aspects of his skill set. He's clearly aging out of the game, but he has still got the high fight IQ. He's still got that finishing ability. And a lot of times what it comes down to is his durability. You look at the Thiago Santos fight and the Anthony Smith fight. These are the last 2 most recent examples. Especially with Anthony Smith, so much was made about the damage Anthony Smith took. Round 1, Anthony Smith nearly finished that fight.
Yes.
And then Thiago Santos, similar thing. He basically just had to outlast, and ultimately be able to take more punishment than his opponents. Can he do the same with Jan Blachowicz? Time will tell. But I, for one, think this is a great fight. I think I've gotten more excited for it as we've gotten closer. I don't know. This is probably the last chance for Glover Teixeira, I would assume.
Yeah.
So that's going to play a factor as well. Bit of a chip on the shoulder, a bit of a kick in the ass of, like, it's now or never. My head says Blachowicz, but it's not going to be easy either way.
No, not at all. This is going to be a dogfight. No, I think it really is. And again, I foresee a finish. As you said, if this goes 5 rounds, I'd be very surprised. And again, Jan, as you said, has showed his ability to do it. But the way that these 2 clash, I just can't see that happening. There's going to be something, quote unquote, spectacular that may just happen in this main event.
Let's talk about the co-main event. There's a lot to make of this one. So this is for the UFC's interim bantamweight title, as Petr Yan and Cory Sandhagen, number 1 versus number 3, look to basically get an interim title or become an interim champion. Now, this fight was originally the anticipated rematch between Petr Yan and now champion Aljamain Sterling, coming off of their very controversial fight at UFC 259, where Petr Yan lands an illegal knee. Aljamain Sterling unable to continue. Aljamain Sterling becomes the new champion. First time ever that's happened in UFC history. Wild times.
Yeah, yes, it was.
Aljamain, after the fight, has to undergo some sort of neck procedure. And, I think it was pretty obvious it was a quick turnaround to try and make this fight here in I guess, the end of October.
Yeah.
And that's ultimately what the case was. He had to drop out of the fight. Meanwhile, over the summer, that fight's already put into place. You have the next 2 guys that are kind of vying for a chance at a title shot, being Cory Sandhagen and a returning TJ Dillashaw. They go to war for 5 rounds. TJ Dillashaw ultimately gets the nod of the scorecards. Very close fight. I feel like the majority opinion says Cory Sandhagen won, but there's a lot of people that say Dillashaw won. You could kind of give it either way. But Dillashaw wins. However, Dillashaw did mess up his knee pretty good in that fight, required knee surgery, so he's unable to step in this fight. So basically, Dominic, we get the first ever UFC title fight where both men in the fight are coming off of losses, but yet when you say that, that obviously sounds pretty bad. Right. However, tell me, Dominic, why this fight is so exciting and for some people might be the best fight on the whole card.
Yeah, this is definitely a lot of people's main event. This is a fantastic stylistic clash. Petr Yan, basically, a lot of people view him as the uncrowned champ. I mean, he lost the fight to Aljamain, as Noah said, but it was due to an illegal knee. The first time we had ever seen a title change hands due to an illegal blow. But it's a fight that he was dominating quite convincingly. Aljamain even so much as came out and said that. So, Petr Yan again looked as the uncrowned champion already. Cory Sandhagen, a guy that we both believe to be a future champion, as well as a lot of other people. He was a phenom in LFA. He's came over to the UFC and looked nothing short of incredible, even outside of the Aljamain Sterling loss. That was quite convincing for Sterling, but he's looked unreal. His fight with TJ could have gone his way. A lot of people did score it for him. So he's coming off of a loss, but everything kind of works in his favor. He gets a title shot anyway, and it is a fantastic fight. Cory Sandhagen, a Swiss Army knife. Petr Yan, fantastic boxer, but his grappling is so slept on, and he shouldn't be. I mean, he is from Russia at the end of the day. So, this is very intriguing, man. And again, the kind of second point to this question being, how did you word it? Does this feel like the actual championship fight? Is that kind of how you said it?
I haven't got there yet.
Okay, then I'm going to hold off. Then I just had it in my brain. But yes, this fight stylistically is amazing. A lot of people are looking forward to this. I, for one, am very much looking forward to it. I want to see if Sandhagen's kind of unique striking. I view him as almost like a Dominic Cruz-esque, the way he moves about the octagon. He's very long, very rangy. Can he use that against such a crisp, technical boxer that is Petr Yan? If it goes to the ground, there's a lot of X's and O's there. I just don't know if we're going to see it down there. But I digress, Noah. This fight is incredible on paper.
I definitely think we're going to see 5 rounds on the feet. And I do think it's going to go 5 rounds. Not that both of these guys are very explosive and very technical to the point where they could get a finish. I mean, Cory Sandhagen, flying knee KO of Frankie Edgar. I mean, that was incredible. And Petr Yan's had some really nice knockout wins. Look at his finish of Uriah Faber. He basically finished that fight multiple times. It was madness. So, but I do think this fight will remain on the feet for the entirety of the bout. While Petr Yan should have a pretty big advantage in the grappling, Cory Sandhagen pretty much primarily striking. I don't think his grappling's not really his forte, though. It's not really what he looks for. He had a lot of nice trips and was very slick in that way against Aljamain Sterling, who was supposed to have the grappling advantage in that fight. But he usually just used it to stop Aljamain from trying to initiate takedowns, initiate clinch. And I could see similar things here. I don't think Yan is going to depend on his wrestling here. I really think you're going to see a bit of a chess match on the feet, but that's where this fight gets so interesting because you could argue Cory Sandhagen's a better striker than Petr Yan.
Yeah.
Petr Yan's very slick, got very, very good at switching stances. That makes him so dangerous because he's good when he's orthodox and when he's southpaw. But Cory Sandhagen might be able to do everything. He might have a more diverse skill set on the feet than Petr Yan. So that's where this fight gets so interesting because if it does stay there, all of a sudden, yes, Jan's the more complete fighter, but I don't know if he's going to have the advantage in where this fight ultimately takes place.
Right.
And now I will offer the question that Dominic was trying to get out in front on, and that's, does this fight to you feel, despite what I said at the beginning, despite the fact that this is for an interim title, does this feel like the fight to crown the true champion at 135 pounds?
So for me, it's a yes and no. If Petr Yan wins, I feel he is the champion just because he is the one that was the champion, lost the belt, but didn't lose the belt at the same time, kind of. For Cory, I view him as a true like interim champion, but not an undisputed. It is because he's coming off of the loss to TJ. He's lost so convincingly to Sterling, who technically is the undisputed champion at the end of the day. And I feel like Cory would view himself kind of in that same boat. Maybe not, but that's just kind of how I view it. I know that's kind of like a BS answer, but that's truthfully how I feel. If Petr wins, I do think he's the undisputed best bantamweight in the world. For Cory, a little bit more left to prove to say he is that guy.
Yeah, I understand what you mean about Sandhagen's loss to Sterling, but if Sandhagen beats Jan, who was going to beat Sterling, it's almost like, can you really say anything? I don't view this as the fight to determine the true champion. While I definitely have a hard time. Like, Jan feels like the champion in my mind. Like, Sterling's holding the belt.
He kind of does already. Yeah.
But up to this point, I've really felt not necessarily that Jan's the champion, but that he is the best bantamweight in the world. Put it that way. This fight, and what's so funny is this is for an interim title, and typically we're not very big proponents of interim titles, but I think this is an example of a fight where it fits.
Yeah.
Just a little side point. I don't know. I don't really view this as like a fight for the true champion. I think in order to get the belt, you got to take the actual belt. It is a fight, though, to where the winner of this, even if it is Cory Sandhagen, I'm probably going to view him as the number one bantamweight in the world, and that's despite that loss to Aljamain Sterling, which, yes, very one-sided, very quick. But, I mean, Cory Sandhagen, man, this guy still so young, still making such improvements in his game, but look at the strength of schedule this guy's been on.
It's insane.
This guy has fought anybody and everybody in this top 10. Very impressive. And yes, he's had a couple losses. Dillashaw, Sterling, I almost said Sandhagen. But he's gotten wins over guys like Marlon Moraes, over Frankie Edgar. Very impressive resume. So if he gets it done here, I'm really going to have a hard time not viewing him as the number one bantamweight in the world. If he beats Petr Yan, I think so highly of Petr Yan's skill set, especially after that Sterling fight, which I know ended rough. But again, he was after basically round one. That was all him.
Yes, it was.
And so hopefully the winner of this bout and Sterling are able to run it at some point. I know there's some whispers out there that maybe Aljamain Sterling is never going to be able to fight again. I don't want to think like that. That fight's got to be. It does get very interesting if Cory Sandhagen wins this fight, because everybody wants to see Jan and Sterling run it back, but we may never see it run back if this fight goes that way. You know.
That's true. That's true.
Let's move on to the feature bout. That's between two lightweight contenders in Islam Makhachev and Dan Hooker, number 5 versus number 6. Dan Hooker stepping in on short notice to replace the injured Rafael dos Anjos. This coming on the heels of a 1-month turnaround.
Yep.
Less than that after Dan Hooker beat Nasrat Haqparast at UFC 266. He stayed in the States. Now he's in
stayed in Vegas in between.
Stayed in Vegas in between. So few factors in this fight. There's a lot of hype for Islam Makhachev. Obviously, he is the next in that line of Dagestan killers. You know, he's the next in the lineage of Khabib. He's Khabib's protege, as everyone continues to kind of label him as the next Khabib. All that. Islam Makhachev has kind of gotten to this point, number 5 ranked, without really having to beat a ton of high-level competition.
Yeah.
I believe Thiago Moises is the best one he's had up to this point, correct?
Yeah, in terms of a ranking, he did have a ranking at the time.
Okay. So, he's number 5 here.
Yeah.
But he's still, Drew Dober was another good one. I'll give him that as well. Drew Dober's been ranked before. So he's had 2 guys that are kind of bubble 15 to 14, 13 rankings. But not really that statement win that's like, this guy is ready for a title fight.
Of course.
While for Dan Hooker, yes, he's had an interesting last year and a half, 2 years or so. Had a if you go back to right before COVID, he had that very controversial close decision with Paul Felder. He did come out with a win, but a lot of people didn't feel like he really did. Then he goes on to nearly beat what people are saying might be the number one lightweight in the world now, and Dustin Poirier in an absolute war of a Fight Night main event, 5-round war. Hooker, man, putting a beating on Poirier at times, and obviously the reverse as well. Then he welcomes Michael Chandler to the UFC at UFC 257, the first pay-per-view of 2021, and gets starched, to be quite honest. Kind of froze under the lights, and Chandler just being able to land a perfect overhand right that stunned and dropped Hooker, and it was all done within a couple minutes. Then he ultimately comes back against Nasrat Haqparast, who good opponent, a guy who's a bit of a prospect, but a guy who hasn't really – he's not a top 15 guy. He's on his way there, but he's not right now. But I thought what was so impressive about that win wasn't necessarily the level of opponent he was fighting, but the way he did it. He did do a lot of grappling in that fight, which is what Nasrat was supposed to have the advantage in. And that just shows a lot of growth in Dan Hooker's game. However, I actually picked Nasrat to win that fight, and it is a similar sentiment to how I feel about this fight. Dan Hooker, due to everything going on in New Zealand and now obviously what's going on here where he kind of stayed in Vegas and now going to Abu Dhabi, he just hasn't had much of a training camp for either of these two fights, but didn't miss a beat in the Nasrat fight. However, Dominic, are these elements going to really hold him back here against Islam Makhachev? Obviously, Islam is a great fighter, but you feel like that's going to hold back Dan Hooker at all here?
You would think, but the way he looked, and he got to stay in the UFC in Vegas at the PI. They have a great facility there. Maybe he comes out and looks still pretty fresh. I mean, this has definitely been a hectic, I'm sure, very stressful time in Dan Hooker's life. But as you said, when he fought Nasrat, to come out and still look good on the feet, but look even better on the floor, which is something we've never seen from Hooker, really said a lot about what he's doing with his game, and he's really dedicated to improving and continuing to, stay in the elite talk of this lightweight division. So, maybe he comes out and looks good. The problem is looking good may not be good enough to beat Islam Makhachev. This is a very hard matchup for him. We said that when it was booked, where, Dan Hooker maybe not so much to lose taking this on short notice and going to Abu Dhabi fighting Islam, but still a little bit to lose at the same time. The closer I get, I feel that way. This is a very tough test for him. And with that grappling improving, there's still a level to this. And Islam Makhachev is the elite grappler in this lightweight division. I'll be curious to see Islam in the striking realm with Dan Hooker, because when he was fighting Thiago, he was okay with being there in the feet. And I know Thiago's not the striker that Hooker is, but if he carries this confidence with him against Hooker, it could get him into some trouble on the feet, because while he's good there, he needs to more than likely grapple to get the easiest path to victory, I should say. And for Hooker, if he can keep it on the feet, I'm going to be very, very intrigued to see how his long, rangy striking may just be able to pull off a big upset here, Noah.
And I think that it should be noted that Islam Makhachev has been knocked out in the UFC.
Yes, he has.
Very early on in his career. And I think based on how I'm kind of talking, I feel like people are going to think that I'm not very high on Islam. I am. I do think that this guy is a future title challenger, really, if you want to say future champion, sure.
Yeah.
I really believe in his talent. I just don't think that he has proven yet that he is a top 5 fighter. This is the fight for him to do it.
Yep, for sure.
I mean, this fight is really, in my opinion, this is all about Islam Makhachev proving that he's a real contender. Dan Hooker, to his credit, takes this fight on short notice, doesn't really have much of a training camp. It's going to be a compromised training camp at best.
Yeah.
But this is a guy that's done it time and time before, so, how much does he really need? Ultimately, Dominic, I don't really see where Dan Hooker has anything to lose here. I know he's had some iffy, the last year or so was a little iffy for him, but I think he got back on track. this was a bit of a favor to the UFC. But he's not treating it like that. This man does seem very confident, though,
He
in Dan
does.
Hooker. He seems to have he seems a bit looser than he was a year ago. He just seems to be enjoying the moment. And that could be very dangerous for a guy that feels like he doesn't feel like he has anything to lose.
It's a dangerous man.
Could be dangerous. And Islam, he has a lot on his shoulders. He is looked at as the next wave, the next Habib, a man that some are saying is one of the best fighters of all time. The odds are what they are. They're very much in Islam's favor. And I would say Islam should be favored in this fight, but at the end of the day, I don't think it's a cakewalk. He might go in there and make it a cakewalk, but the mental game leading up, it's and I'm not even talking about like mental warfare between Hooker and Makhachev, just the factors outside, all the expectations.
Lots of pressure.
There's a lot on Islam's shoulders here, so I'll be interested to see how he performs.
To say the least.
A win over Dan Hooker, no matter what kind of compromised camp or anything, a win here, and this man is knocking on the door of a title shot, that being Islam Makhachev. If Dan Hooker wins, I would say that man probably earned it as well.
Yeah.
I know you probably don't give it to him over the winner of Gadzhi or Chandler, but especially if Chandler wins. But I don't know, man. I think Hooker could really – I think this could be a title eliminator depending on how everything plays out. It just might.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, 100%.
Let's get into the rest.
That's right. There's a little more.
Starting with top 10 heavyweights, number 5, Alexander Volkov. They call him Drago. He's going up against the surging Marcin Tybura.
Yeah.
We've really enjoyed seeing Tybura kind of come from nowhere, really. This was a guy that I remember when we were watching a few years ago. We kind of wrote him off. He got knocked out a few times. He had some lackluster performances. He just didn't look like really, maybe a fair comparison. And I don't mean to kind of pile on the guy, but a lot of how I feel about Augusto Sakai now is how I felt about Tybura at one point. Tybura was ranked, but I really just didn't see the upside. Yeah. But now I'm seeing it more and more. Yes, he's running into some adversity in some of these fights. The Greg Hardy fight, Greg had a really nice showing early on in the striking, and then Tybura just kind of outlasted him, outpaced him, and was able to get that win in round 2. But anyways, Dominic, my question here for this fight, Tybura, nice win streak leading up here. Volkov coming off a loss to Cyril Gane in a very underrated fight, I would say.
I agree.
Has anything from Tybura's win streak ultimately prepared him for the striking of Alexander Volkov?
Yeah, that's a great question. And again, when you have a guy as big as Volkov, he's always going to be such a hard matchup for anyone, regardless of his skill set, right? Because he's so long, he's so rangy. So if you're a guy that likes to grapple, you got to try and close the distance, which I could see Tybura trying to do in this one. It may be, honestly, his best path to victory because, again, Tybura going to be the shorter guy, the more stout guy, and Volkov really can use that range. He hasn't used it as good as we would like to. We've discussed that on the show, but nevertheless, it's still there, and it's going to be prominent in this one when you see them, face to face with each other in the octagon. So for Tybura, this is a guy that was 4-5 in the UFC. Now he's rallied off 5 in a row. Few of those via finish. He's looked good as of late. He's faced adversity and overcame it. So in this one, I do think he has showed enough to where I could see him winning this fight for sure. In terms of what can he do, again, he may just have to grapple. I don't know if he's going to want to stand with Volkov for 3 rounds. I just don't see that going in his favor whatsoever. But if he can land, a big shot, he kind of has some underrated power, being that he's that shorter guy. But if he can close in, maybe clinch him up, do some damage there, I'm definitely curious to see how this plays out, man. And it's a big one for Volkov to see if he can bounce back.
Yeah, it's definitely big for both guys. And I do think that while Tybura's win streak has been impressive and he has had to, really battle through some adversity and really, dig deep to get some of these wins, I don't know if any of these wins have really prepared him for this fight. I mean, he's fought a lot of power punchers. He's never had the best chin in the heavyweight division. Fighting guys like Greg Hardy and Walt Harris, I don't think that really prepares you for Volkov. And I mean, how could it? Outside of fighting someone like Ciryl Gane, I don't know how you get prepared for Volkov.
Of course.
Again, the size discrepancy is going to be interesting. And maybe you're right. Volkov has had a large, I don't know why I hung on the L right there,
emphasis.
A very large susceptibility to the takedown, to the grappling. It's just, if Tybura is able to have that much success with the grappling here to where he can basically go to it time and time again and essentially grind his way to a win, to me, that would show a lot of improvements in his grappling. While it's been good, I would be very impressed if he can take down and hold down someone at the stature of Alexander Volkov. It's going to be hard to get inside without having to eat a few jabs along the way.
Oh, yeah.
And for Volkov, we're still trying to figure out, we're still trying to see this guy really put it together for a run.
I agree.
It seems like just as soon as he gets kind of back on track, like his win over Overeem, where he looked incredible.
So good, yeah.
Then he gets put up with Ciryl Gane, and again, that's not an easy fight, obviously. Ciryl Gane is essentially, potentially, the best heavyweight in the world. And him and Volkov, he basically lost every round to Gane, but I thought he at least showed that he could hang in there,
Yeah.
Maybe that fight goes a little different if they fought again. I don't know. But Volkov just, it seems, he has these performances against like Curtis Blades where he just gets outworked for 5 rounds, gets put on his ass every round and can't really find a way to get out. It's just he seems to have those kind of performances where it's like he almost is a bit in autopilot, but then he comes out and has great finishes sometimes. Didn't he have a win over Walt Harris back at UFC 254?
Yeah, with a body
kick. Yeah. So you look at back-to-back performances, that and Overeem. I mean, that was a great showing. So
yeah,
a lot of it just seems matchup dependent for him, and maybe that's how it is for all fighters. But it feels more so with him. You get a large variable in his performances based on the matchup.
Yeah.
Here it feels a little favorable, if I'm going to say so on paper. But I like Tybura. I like what he's been showing me, and I kind of hope to see some more improvements here.
Yeah.
Next one. This is my personal, second most anticipated fight on the card. Jan Sandhagen's number 1 for me. This fight's number 2. And this is Li Jingliang and Khamzat Chimaev. Khamzat, the 2020 newcomer of the year for the Joeys. And essentially, it's so crazy. This man a year ago had won 3 fights in a month and a half or 2 months, and he was booked to end the year against Leon Edwards.
Number 3 in the world.
Crazy. Yeah. Obviously, that fight fell through 2 or 3 times. 3 times, actually. What ends up happening, Khamzat has multiple terrible bouts with COVID, posting stuff on his Instagram story, hinting at retirement when he's coughing up blood in the sink. It's nasty stuff. COVID sucks.
Yeah.
However, he's back now.
Oh, yeah.
And he's going up against the Leech, who is a dangerous opponent. However, based on what we saw from Khamzat at the end of last year, I think this is an appropriate step forward. The guy has the hype behind him. He has the skill that it looks to compete with the best of the best in this division. Gerald Mearchart's a better win than people are going to give it credit for, and the way he did it, the one-punch knockout, makes it even more impressive. So this is an appropriate step up, but obviously the Leech isn't a pushover, and I don't want to mix these, even though this question hints at a certain direction, it's not really what I'm going to go, but I want to ask you, do you feel like not enough thought from the MMA community? Khamzat's largely favored in this fight. And while we both highly respect, highly value the Leech's skill set, we think it's not that easy of a fight.
No.
But even beyond that, even if this was, some cakewalk opponent for Khamzat Chimaev, is there not enough thought being given to maybe how affected Khamzat still is after his multiple bouts of COVID?
It doesn't feel like we're seeing it talked about very much in the community, really. I mean, maybe you see it here or there, but this is going to be a prominent aspect of this fight and how this may go, because if he comes out, the Leech is not just going to lay down for Khamzat Chimaev.
Oh, he's a fast starter too.
Li Jingliang is going to bring the we've not seen anybody bring pressure to Chimaev. Li Jingliang is going to bring it, just as Ponzinibbio with a one-punch KO in his last outing. So, again, this is already not an easy fight, and when you factor in, he had very bad outlying issues with COVID during it, and then after the illness had a lot of underlying issues as well. So he's had a long, layoff, and you would like to think he is 100% recovered, but we're not going to truly find out until we see him in there. Look at Cody Garbrandt, example number one. He looked very different than the usual Cody Garbrandt. He had a very bad stint with COVID, and his cardio didn't look like the Cody of old. So that's just one example there of a prominent name that is. So for Khamzat, everyone is focused on him, right? All the eyes, all the pressure is on Chimaev here, because he took the MMA world by storm. And as Noah said, this is kind of the rightful step. If you take away how he just stormed onto the scene last year, this is technically the fight he should have been given in that fourth one, not launched in with Leon Edwards. And obviously that fight didn't happen. But here we are now. This is a fight that makes sense. It's a very, very intriguing fight stylistically. And again, you're getting someone that's not just going to lay down for Khamzat Chimaev. He's going to give it his all, Li Jingliang, that is. He's going to pressure forward. And man, if he can pull off the upset here, put some respect on Li Jingliang. I can't wait for this fight.
And not to mention how hard it is to finish Li Jingliang. He's a very durable opponent, and he finishes at a very high clip, but also has gone the distance multiple times. He does have the cardio to do it. So if Khamzat isn't able to get that one-punch KO early, we may have to see his cardio be tested for all three rounds. While I have no doubt that the Khamzat of last year could go at a pace that he would put on for 15 minutes. I mean, the guy was just uber impressive, and I want to believe that he can still do that. It's just a factor that should be weighed in a little bit.
Yes.
I'm not at the end of the day, maybe for the odds that really shouldn't be factored in, but even if you don't factor it in, Khamzat is a bit highly favored here. I mean, Jingliang is, I just think that people don't understand how good he really can be. He's had some moments where he's looked less than stellar, but he seems to really be putting it all together at the right time. And it's going to be a clash, and we're really going to find out a lot about what we have at Khamzat Chimaev here.
Yeah, for sure.
Following that, light heavyweight action, 2 top 10 fighters at number 7, Magomed Ankalaev, and the returning number 8, Volkan Oezdemir, coming off of a year and a quarter or so layoff. He last fought at UFC 251, welcoming Yuri Prohaska to the UFC. So haven't seen Volkan in a long time, and he doesn't get an easy fight in his return.
No,
he goes from fighting Yuri Prohaska, who is just talk about a workhorse, that guy is. And now you get put against Magomed Ankalaev, who is a stylistically opposite fighter to Yuri. But if anything, is even more difficult of a fight for someone who does depend on their power as much as Volkan does. Magomed Ankalaev, the probably most technically skilled fighter in this entire light heavyweight division. He has the potential to be a title challenger, a champion. I have a lot of faith that he will be a champion at some point. He seems to just have the skill everywhere. And while Volkan is a great fighter and, a guy that I think has kind of become underrated over the last couple of years, I don't really see how he wins this fight. I'm struggling to do it. Dominic, can you tell me how Volkan Oezdemir pulls out a win here?
Yeah, so funny enough, and again, this is a tough fight for Volkan, but I'm leaning for him in this one. I don't know why. Well, actually, I do know why, and I'm going to tell you why right now. I don't know why I started saying that. Volkan is a guy that is a fast starter, at least historically, can be a fast starter. I mean, he's no time for a reason. He had 2 under-a-minute finishes en route to his title shot against Daniel DC Cormier. That's when everything kind of started switching around for his career in the UFC. But if he can come out and make this a barn burner like we've seen Ankalaev be tempted to do with Jan Kudalaba, example number 1, Volkan may just have the power to end this fight early. But if he doesn't put him away early, that's where Magomed really will begin to shine in this one, I believe. He hasn't lost since his UFC debut. He's won 6 in a row. So, again, a very tough fight for Oezdemir. But if he can come out like that Volkan of old and really pressure forward, make Magomed uncomfortable early, we've seen him be tempted in barn burners before. If he wants to do that here with Volkan, he may want to second guess it because the power here that Oezdemir carries is very, very dangerous.
Yeah, that's very true. And I thought Ankalaev showed a lot of growth in the fact that he didn't get lured into that in the rematch with Jan Kudalava. But Kudalava and Oezdemir are just very different levels of power and ultimately just fighters in general. However, I do think there's something to be said about Ankalaev's chin hasn't been tested really. And he's not huge for this division. Like, he's a big guy, but he's not like a heavyweight, that's fighting at light heavyweight. Like, he feels like a pretty firm light heavyweight. Mm-hmm. Well, Volkan Oezdemir is a big guy.
Big guy, yeah.
And obviously big power. So I will be kind of interested to see if Oezdemir does kind of start fast, maybe what he can. If he can land flush, will Magomed be affected by that, or will he be able to kind of just weather it, wear it? I do think there's something to be said about that. I just wonder, due to the layoff, due to the fashion of his previous loss and how he is kind of, Oezdemir is in a bit of a tough spot here coming in. Will there be some reservations? Will he, you saw in his title fight with Daniel Cormier, he really didn't come out and fight the way he had fought to earn that title fight. I know he's going up against Daniel Cormier, one of the best of all time, and his odds of winning that fight weren't great in general, but he just didn't even really do what got him to the dance. Mm-hmm. And I worry you might see a little bit of that here, some reservations, some fighting fighting to not lose, but not fighting to win.
Yeah, and against a guy like Magomed, you can't do that. So.
No. Last one here. Your prelim headliner, she's back. Number 10, Amanda Ribas, going up against number 12, Virna Jandiroba. Are you all right? I heard a big old bang over there.
So for those that don't know, before we started recording, I stubbed my toe really bad and I yelled. I just did it again and I had to bite down not to scream again. Okay. But everything's fine. Everything's fine.
Okay. So obviously, Dominic, I know you're very excited, as is a lot of MMA fans, for the return of Amanda Ribas. And this is an interesting fight for her to come back to. Yes. Because we know Amanda Ribas, in her last outing back in January against Marina Rodriguez, she ultimately basically finished twice on the feet. Didn't have the best display of striking defense, head movement, things like that. Going up against world-class striker and Marina Rodriguez, obviously. But then here, and I should also point out that Amanda Ribas is obviously known for her jiu-jitsu. Mm-hmm. Well, in this matchup, I feel like Virna Jandiroba holds up very well with her in the jiu-jitsu, but I think Amanda Ribas has a big advantage in the striking here, which is kind of interesting because I always thought when she came back from that devastating loss she took in January, I thought she would really try to get back to the basics of where she really was strongest in. However, here, Virna got outstruck by Mackenzie Dern.
Yeah.
Mackenzie Dern got outclassed by Amanda Ribas. Obviously, that's MMA math. Doesn't always work that way. But I think it's clear that Amanda Ribas has a large advantage in the striking here. And I look for her to really keep this on the feet. It's not clear if Virna has an advantage in the grappling and the jiu-jitsu, but if I'm Amanda, I don't even know if you risk it. Just really look to keep it standing. Obviously, Virna does a pretty good job of closing distance, of clinching up. That was where she had her most success against Mackenzie Dern. And Amanda Ribas isn't – she might be a little easier to overpower than Mackenzie Dern was. So that could be an interesting battle there as well if it does get clinch heavy. But ultimately, Dominic, this is the fight that I know you wanted – one of the fights I know you're most excited for because you're a big fan of Amanda Ribas. What should we expect from this one?
Yeah, this is a really good fight. I really do believe so. Virna Jandiroba is very undervalued, underrated in this division, the strawweight division, man. It shows how deep it is with
So
these
good.
two ranked 10 and 12. It's crazy. Fajibas hasn't fought since January, has had to battle COVID since then. So another one that maybe,
Yeah.
hopefully
It's
they're
another battle, you know.
yeah. So hopefully 100% recovery for her. And again, like you said, she's known for her jiu-jitsu, but she is in a sense a more well-rounded version of Mackenzie Dern in terms of overall skill set. Her jiu-jitsu not on the level of Mackenzie Dern. Is that does that make sense in a way? Like in terms of an all-around mixed martial artist?
You said Amanda is?
Right.
Yeah.
Her jiu-jitsu not as strong as Dern,
Yeah.
but as an all-around fighter.
Agreed.
So again, on the feet, this could be fun. I've seen more from Amanda on the feet to make me feel more comfortable. On the ground, if we see some grappling transitions, it could be very fun. Virna has 13 submission victories in her career out of 17. So what was crazy, though, she didn't really even attempt to grapple with Mackenzie. Again, the levels there, and take with it what you will. But this is a very good fight. Can Amanda bounce back? She's still 4-1 in the UFC. She's still very young. Virna Jandiroba, 3-2 in the UFC. But someone, again, who I said is undervalued, underappreciated. A big fight for someone to make a statement, to launch in to that top 10. And there's just so many fun intangibles here. I can't wait to see how they play out.
Now, are you aware of the ongoing wager that was put in place on the MMA Hour with Ariel Helwani?
I am not. Please enlighten
So,
me.
I mentioned at the top of the show about Island Boy, the song that's
Right.
trending on the charts right now.
Right.
Well, Ariel Helwani is a big fan of the song.
He is.
He has been singing it a lot on his show, and he put out basically a statement to any fighter fighting this Saturday. He said, if you come out to the song Island Boy or any sort of remixed version, whatever, then he will put that fighter's picture up on his wall that he has behind him, which has some of the best fighters of all time. Daniel Cormier is behind there, people like that. And there was a few fighters where it looked like they might do it, but ultimately, it looks like the one that may do it is Virna Jandiroba.
Really?
Someone, whether I don't know if it was her coach or whoever, sent Ariel a clip of her dancing to the song in the hotel room. And so that's a factor here, Dominic, because if Virna comes out to Island Boy and loses, that is not as bad as if like Izzy would lose after remember when he did the dance when he came out to what was that fight for? That was the Robert Whittaker fight.
That was the Whittaker fight. Yeah.
If he had lost that fight, oh my God, could you imagine?
Yeah.
But for Virna, if she loses this, it's a tough pill to swallow.
Okay, everybody keep an eye on this. Man, what if 5 different fighters come out to Island Boy? That would be crazy.
That's what's funny is Petrosky was the first one.
The tough guy from this
because Sean Brady's with him. And,
I saw that tweet from Sean.
Yeah, so Sean Brady's been trying to push Petrosky to do it, and then Petrosky told Ariel to paint me like one of your French girls, and Ariel got really freaked out by it. So I believe Ariel has DM'd Dan Hooker about it.
Yeah,
but apparently Virna is the one that is at least the closest to proving that she's got what it takes right now.
So just a simple question to cap off the rest. Yes or no, will at least one fighter come out to that song? Off the top of your head.
Okay. I'm going to say no. And you want to know why?
No too.
You want to know why? I believe that they're going to try, but I think Dana's going to catch wind that Ariel had set this up. And I think he hates Ariel so much that he will literally not let a fighter come out to that song just to spite him. I mean, this is the man that I usually thought he was above that, by this point. It's been a long time since those two have interacted. But the man had a whole ass restraining order put on Ariel Helwani during this time at ESPN.
Yeah.
So I don't think the bad blood's ending anytime soon. Now
we shall see.
We didn't mention during the Islam Makhachev Dan Hooker fight that we do have a distinguished guest joining
special guest. Yes.
Would you like to reveal who that might be?
Ladies and gentlemen, the king of MMA Twitter, MMA community worldwide, global phenomenon, Hasbulla will be in attendance at UFC 267, will be in support of Islam Makhachev. He has sent out a threatening message to Dan Hooker, letting him know that he will be in the area. And as of this morning, we're recording this on Thursday morning, Dana White will be meeting with Hasbulla in Abu Dhabi once he arrives.
Is that real, you think?
Well, Dana White posted it.
Do you remember? I saw the clip, but you remember when he just got interviewed last month by Robbie?
With Robbie
Fox. Yeah. And Robbie asked him about meeting with Hasbulla. He goes, "Yeah, we have a meeting." And he goes, "Get out." And he goes, "No, I'm just fucking with you." And then started dying laughing.
He had a meeting or an interview with Pat McAfee earlier this week. And he was talking about Hasbulla again. He's like, yeah, this guy's the UFC head of Russia apparently now. So, hey, if they at least get a picture together, woo, that's going to be the MMA picture of the year for 2021 right there.
Well said, well said. I had to put it in there because I kind of clowned you before the show. I said you would mention it over under 1.5 times. You didn't mention it at all, so I lost that bet. So I had to at least bring it up once. To
pay up, maybe. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, but that's going to wrap it up for this spooky edition of the MMA Weekend Preview. Make sure to join us on Monday.
We record Sunday, though.
We record on Sunday, but make sure to join us on Monday.
November 1st. Recap.
Yep, we'll be talking all about UFC 267, the fallout, what's next, and it'll be the first of our regional showcase segment. We are watching UAE
Warriors. You're right.
UAE Warriors 24 airing on Friday. They are doing 2 cards, one on Thursday, one on Friday. This is the launch of a new deal with Fight Pass and the UFC to air their cards on there for 2 years. I'm very happy about that. And ultimately, we went with the Friday card. It's a little better, 2 title fights.
Yeah.
The Thursday card is strictly for I believe it's Arabian fighters. So
okay.
That card's strictly for that. No title fights or anything. More of a showcase for homegrown talent. But the Friday card, more diverse set of guys and more what we're looking for, I think, in this segment. So yeah. We'll be recapping that card as well on Sunday. So make sure to watch that event on UFC Fight Pass if you want to be in the know. Mm-hmm. But until then, Dominic, tell the good people where they can find you on social media.
Can find me on Twitter, on Instagram, at @DSleeve14. More importantly, go follow, go engage, go interact with the show on Twitter, on Instagram, at BAJ_MMA podcast.
Well said. And for me, you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, at @NTBaker_. If you go to my bio, there is a link that will take you to a link tree, which provides you a list of links to all the platforms the podcast is on, along with those social media platforms. So that includes,
but it's not limited to. I mean, well,
kind of is.
We won't get into it.
The Twitter, the Instagram, the YouTube channel, and Spotify, Google, and Apple Podcasts. It's all on there. And there's a couple links for today's sponsor, Anchor.
Shout out to Anchor, baby.
Shout out to Anchor. The first one, leaving a voice message.
Come on, please. It's been a little bit.
It's been a while. Also, if you'd like to leave, sorry, I got a little off track. Leaving a voice message would be nice, but also if you'd like to become a supporter of the podcast, you could do that with one of those links. It's just a few dollars a month. All that money goes back into improving the quality of the podcast. I also wanted to give another shout out, and now I can't remember what I was going to say before we hold off. So, I guess that's it.
Maybe Monday we'll remember.
Yeah, we'll see y'all on Monday.
See you guys.